Hello and welcome to the Changing Future sessions with Scottish Widows for Pension Awareness Day. Now we at Channel 4 are delighted to partner with Scottish Widows as they help you plan for your future. And we have lots more to come. We're pleased you could join us for the Scottish Widows Changing Future sessions, and I hope it'll answer any questions that you may have about your financial future. Now, over to the experts.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Changing Future series. I'm Alison Nicolson. I am from Scottish Widows, and I'm joined here this evening to discuss women's futures with Anna Lane from the Wisdom Council. Gosh, Anna, I would never have anticipated the last 6 months. Nobody possibly could. And what it's actually meant for us as individuals. How's it affected you?
It's been a tough time, I won't lie. I'm one of the families that sadly lost a close family member to COVID. I lost my father at the very beginning of the crisis. So we actually went into lockdown something like March the 8th. So that was very, very tough. And it's obviously been compounded by the fact that I also run my own business. So like a lot of companies, I had to then reinvent where my staff worked. We already did a lot of things digitally, but it has just for the young people in my team, I think particularly it's been really, really hard for them. You know, some of them rent rooms where they've been working off their beds as opposed to having an office. So it's been tough, but staying positive. How about you? How's it been for you?
We didn't have it as tough as that, but not easy either. I have 2 disabled children, both of who were on the shielding list. So like you, we went early, 12th of March. As we've learnt more, it's less worrying because medically we're understanding more and we're understanding children are less affected, but it was still 5 solid months of not setting foot over a front door, and it's affected us all in different ways. And you know, we're here to talk about women and how they save for the future, but we do know, like in your circumstance, men are medically so much worse affected by COVID.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
You know.
And it does make this conversation, how can I put it, not difficult. You have to be sensitive to that. So, I mean, we've been doing a lot of work trying to get women to engage more with the idea of long-term savings and investments. We've done an 18-month program, but I have to admit that back in March and April, I wasn't quite sure where and how that would be the appropriate thing to start talking about, you know, more publicly through social and everything again. However, they have been more impacted from a health point of view, but economically it is women that actually are coming out of the crisis more impacted because of where they work, because of obviously the propensity of younger women in service industries. And the thing is, and it's probably the same for your team, I've just impressed upon my team, my work team, is that don't stop saving into the pension now. In fact, if you're managing to save, if you're one of the lucky people, and obviously there are people that aren't able to save and save more, but if you are saving a bit more, how about putting just a little bit more into your pension?
Young savers, it's so hard. You know, even though we've had auto enrollment, a big success for men and women in the workplace, we're still seeing about half of youngsters worrying about where the money will come from when they get older. And even more so for young girls, because as you know, in the retirement report that we launched at the end of last year, pre-COVID, so this is before the COVID impact, a young girl saving today will have on average £78,000 less in her pot than a boy of the same age. And for me, previous to being in this job, I kind of thought this was, you know, all a bit of chat about women are in different jobs, but when you see it in hard fact, £78,000, that means she has to work till she's 95. That's actually quite scary, and it makes me quite passionate to engage men in the workforce as well as women to try and make a change.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think, you know, the reality is that most people in this country don't have enough. We went to see some headmistresses, and we just talked to them about the gender pension gap, not in a sort of a negative way, because the flip side to all of this is we see women are better educated and more of them working than ever. There's more female entrepreneurs. There's some massively positive stuff. But we went to see them just to see if they had any awareness that, the girls that were going through the school system, going off into university apprenticeships, if they had any awareness at all about the gender pension gap. And these headmistresses, literally, you could have heard a pin drop. They were so shocked about it. And I think the general consensus is that really children should know about this, 16-year-olds, 18-year-olds, much, 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 much earlier than finding out perhaps when you're 30, 35, 40, when for sure you can do something about it. But it's not the same as starting when you first go into the workplace. So auto-enrollment obviously is a big step in the right direction towards addressing that.
I talked about some of the things that I have done in my career and just not thought about. So have my children. I was fortunate, and my employer still paid into my pension. And people, please check, because your employer might still pay into your pension. A lot of larger employers do, but not all do. But my husband could have topped me up. I could have topped up myself when I went back to work. I never thought about any of that. Then I went part-time because, as I said, I've got 2 disabled children. Brilliant for me from a work-life balance point of view, but did I think about my pension? Sadly not.
No. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point you make about when you because when my background's the city, I worked in finance for years and years and years, and actually we always got very good pensions. I'm honest with you, I never paid much attention to it, and it's such a crap thing to say, isn't it? But you sort of sign up and you see it, and it all looks really boring, and you just move on. I've obviously changed my mind dramatically. It's not boring, it's actually life empowering. But it's only when it's those things that happen in your life that you start to. So having my daughter, and at that point I was actually moving from being employed to being self-employed, and that is so different because I wasn't aware that pensions contributions from your employer stop at whatever it is, week 39 or 40, you'll be the expert on that. But also just thinking about getting your partner to contribute and top up your pension, it just would never have occurred to me to have the conversation. And then I have to say the biggest eye-opener for me, particularly when you launch your own business or you go self-employed, was talking to a financial advisor and just getting that reinforcement that just keep going. I think particularly when you're self-employed, regularly saving things is actually quite hard. You tend to look at your earnings annually, but the advice to not drop that at all, you might drop the amount but don't drop it, I think was really valuable, as was the other thing, of course, insurance and the rainy day savings. That was, I think, just impressed upon me. 1 in 5
people have seen their income drop through this. So we have a situation where we already have a number of minorities who really are more affected or less provided for their pension already. So for example, we're talking about women already this evening, but 67% of ethnic minority people don't have a pension at all. They're not a member of a pension scheme. That's a scary statistic.
That's unbelievable.
Isn't it? And
that's a very share. Why is that?
It'll be, I would imagine, some of the jobs that people do where they're working multiple jobs and they don't hit the auto-enrollment threshold. And therein is a problem that we are lobbying to change by removing the threshold for auto-enrollment so that everybody benefits, irrespective of the job that you do, and that your employer must contribute on your behalf, and you must too. But to bring that number of people back into saving for the future would really make a difference.
And that is such a powerful stat, Ali. And the thing is, there's a few other things too, aren't there? Is that because auto-enrollment is so good in so many ways. However, what about sort of the over 40, over 45s, the people that fall outside on the other side? Obviously, a lot of them are women, and I think this point about part-time, so not, but basically falling below the threshold, is so critical, and therefore you have to say what can you do to actually engage people to help them and take up personal pensions if they don't get workplace. I mean, that's a massive challenge.
Oh, without a doubt. And if you look at the low paid roles in our economy, 69% of those are done by women. So another staggering statistic. So, and 74% of part-time workers are women, which maybe is less staggering when we think about ladies going off to have kids and coming back and working part-time, but it's still very high.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because you know, those roles give flexibility, but I guess companies, policy, government need to consider how they are also taken account of when you think about pensions provisions and savings for the future, and also all those sorts of roles. Do you have formal employers, you know, regularly communicating with people to say, you know, you come on, you have a pension, here's what you do. That whole kind of infrastructure doesn't really exist, I guess, either. So that would also have an impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually thinking broader, can your partner contribute to your pension? I mean, I never even thought about that when I went off on maternity leave or went part-time. Well, they can. Yeah. They absolutely can.
They can, yeah.
And if before you went part-time, you were off on maternity leave, I didn't think about actually going through the process to claim child benefit. But you have to do that to keep your national insurance record up in order to get your full statutory pension. I had no idea. And so just these little tips of engaging people, even on Facebook tonight, folks, if you have any questions, please type away. But these types of little tips that actually we need to get these messages out into society better, because people are missing out on money that is rightly theirs.
Do you know, that is such an important point about if you go on maternity, the child benefit piece, because I think at the time that I went on maternity, I was still working in the city, and I didn't think that I would qualify for child benefit. But because I was in the process of setting up a business, the accountant actually advised me and said, look, this is absolutely linked to pension contribution. I had no idea.
Because most people don't actually know how much a state pension is at just over £170 if you're eligible for all of it, if you've worked 35 years with national insurance contributions. So there's a lot of ifs for you to get that money, and you have to claim it. So it's a very good source of information.
I mean, we find that when we talk to women about, men and women about pensions and what people need, it's very true. People just have no idea how much they need, for how long, and also to get to the state pension, to get to whatever that is a week, you actually, the equivalent of what you'd need in a savings pot is quite big, isn't it?
It is.
So it's, you've got the stats on that, haven't you? But I don't think people have got any idea. What does it equate to?
So we recommend that the minimum percentage of your salary that you should save is 12%. To have an okay retirement, 15 really to be comfortable. But what does that mean? Because everybody's different. So that's a kind of stat that I'm throwing out there. But we have quite a bit of a fun gamification on our website. Again, I would encourage people to go on and look at it. It's called My Future Self. And it'll ask you how much you think you need to live on when you stop having a salary. So what sort of holidays do you want? Will you have to pay rent? Do you own your home? All these types of things. How much money do you think you might need? And then how much do you have in your pension and how much are you paying? So really quite simple questions that most of us should be able to answer or indeed find out. And as part of that, it will tell you what age you'll be able to retire with the pot that you expect. So some of that is really scary, and we've had these out on site with consumers and on employer premises, and the reaction you get when somebody's told they're going to have to work till they're 98 and they see themselves at 98. My goodness, I'm not sure what quality of life you may have at 98, but it really brings home working to that age is not something most people want to do. And whilst
we'll be cyborgs by then.
I know. And whilst we know that more people will live to 100, the younger generation, many of them will now live to 100. They don't want to be working till 100. You want to have a period whereby you can finance yourself without working. And so what I would say to people is, I can give you stats, I can tell you the percentage you need to save, but go on and have a play around on your own personal circumstance. So, and you hopefully will be pleasantly surprised, but I think in many cases, most of you will be shocked. But at least you'll know, and then you can do something about it.
So I think anything you've got that people can go on, play around, it's not as difficult as you think. it is not about huge sums of money. It's just a little bit now regularly can probably dramatically reduce that amount of time. You know, it doesn't have to be 98, put it that way.
But actually, when you ask a lady if they know how much they're saving or how they save, then actually nearly 1 in 2 doesn't even know what they're saving, never mind what they're investing in. So
what they're saving,
what they're saving, like, yeah. So
okay.
So what we saw in
I haven't got any savings. It's not a problem.
Oh, nightmare! What we saw in the report at the end of last year is 42% of women don't actually know how much they're saving into their pension. So we can be really passionate about the difference that we make for climate change and all of these things, and that is right for those that are educated in their pension, and they understand what they're saving and they understand what it means. But we've got a real base job to get women really understanding what a pension is more than they do now, because it's quite a bit more than men. About a third of men don't understand, so women really have a lot more, and that comes back to the financial education we were talking about earlier. And women are more likely, because of that, to feel they're not prepared for retirement. So, you know, nearly 6 out of 10 women don't feel they're prepared for retirement, and we definitely feel we have a part to play, as do other organisations. Ensuring Women's Future programme from the CII, for example, the work you're doing with the Wisdom Council. There are lots of people in the market who want to educate everybody in the benefit of long-term savings, but particularly other groups like women, the ethnic minority groups that I talked about earlier, who might not be thinking about it just now, and therefore sleepwalking into quite a dark future for themselves when they have to rely just on the state pension, which at its maximum is just over £170 a week. So it's not a lot of money for people. And again, I think that's quite a shocking statistic when people hear it, is if you don't plan now, that's what you're facing, and that's if you've paid your maximum contributions.
But what's the sort of generic figure? I mean, for men and women in this country, in terms of, because we know that most people don't have enough. So and I know. I mean, obviously, your customers are men and women, and so how sort of, what's the challenge? That's what I mean.
So the kind of target amount, and I'm reticent to say this because I want people to go on and have a look and work out for what they want for their future life.
Go on, just give us a clue.
Everybody's different, and but if we look at a target of around £25,000 a year to live on, that's your kind of average amount. But the earlier you start, the better. If you were to start in your 20s, and you want to then take a career break to have kids, you'll have paid for that career break with the extra investment income that you will get. So the earlier you can start, the better. Definitely.
But we did quite a lot of work with younger millennials and millennials as part of our Yes You Can project. And it is very different when you're talking to somebody who is already doing something. And then you basically say, actually, just do a little bit more. It's really quite different. And we found them very engaged. And I think the other thing is that they seem to, because I'm obviously not a millennial, so I have to say they don't seem to mind talking about money so much. They just don't talk about this is another thing is that we've observed, and it's without to make a completely sweeping statement, is to get to what you're talking about, Ali. Is it's really important that women talk about this in the networks, and then, you know, the people like them actually do this, and they save more into their pensions. And I think that's one of the things that just doesn't really happen. I mean, if you think about your own friendship group, you probably actually got rocket science sorts of investors, but my friends, very rarely, most of my friends don't work in finance. They don't even know what I do. Or else they come along to me with a little bit of sort of crumpled paper with sort of a pension statement on it and ask me to look at it, and I can't make head nor tail of it. But we never discuss it.
And it kind of leads on to another area where women are reticent to talk about pensions and long-term savings, and that is sadly when there's divorce. And we all know the divorce rate, and I'm sure it will be tested through the current period. But most women do not even think about pensions, theirs or their husbands, as they settle in estate through a divorce. And that's about, we did a bit of work on this and calculated a couple of years ago that that's about £5 billion of assets that should be redistributed during divorce that are not. And we can't say, well, actually, that culturally that's our fault or a lady's fault for not feeling that they can raise that or even thinking they should raise it. With some of this stuff, we have to make quite political change. So in that case, we need to, and we are lobbying for this alongside others, we need to make sure that the pension is part of the default assets when a divorce settlement is being calculated, and it's not left for the lady or the man if the lady's the key earner.
It must work the other way too,
totally or the man to raise it or even think about it. We should start from a position of everything is halved and work back from there, and that's a change to the way that the law works at the moment. In the same way that when we talk about youngsters coming through, oh my goodness, I sound like my mum, youngsters. When we think about the 20 to 30-year-olds coming through, if they are working 2 jobs, which more women do, but many men do to make ends meet, and they're not on each individual job hitting the auto-enrollment threshold, they miss out on employer contributions and they miss out on that tax relief. Actually, it's another area we're lobbying for, is to remove that bottom threshold so that everyone, if you're working, has the ability to save and their employer has to contribute. And that as well would make a difference to some of these groups, minority ethnic groups and ladies, where actually just not triggering that auto-enrolled pension scheme having to be there for them. But it would be lovely to end just on, what would you do differently if you were 20? What would you tell your future self, Anna?
Well, I think obviously in the context of this conversation, I wish that somebody had told me to put more into my pension. I had an employer who were very generous in terms of what they topped up, but we didn't have anybody who came into our workplace and talked to us about that. And when I look at some of my friends now who did do that, and I see how different they are financially, and it's not that you can't touch it, but it's made such a massive difference to them, and they didn't top up by much.
But for me, I think I wish we would redefine the word pension. So that's our challenge, because I think if somebody said to me when I was younger, well, how much income do you want? What sort of salary do you want when you don't want to work anymore? That would have resonated a bit more with me 30, 40 years ago when I was putting money away, because the word pension, the word retirement, it is seen as something that's boring. But actually all we're doing is giving ourselves a pot to live on when we don't want to be working, or at least working full time, or having that second career that we all strive to have. I'm involved in a few disability charities and I want to continue to do that. That second career that gives something back, you have to be able to still pay your bills. And whether that's because you work part-time or whether you work or you don't work at all, but you rely on your pension pot. The big things for me that I would do differently, and I would go back and tell myself in coming through, was I never thought at all about the long-term savings or pension when I made decisions through life. When I had my kids and I went off on maternity leave, it was the last thing in my mind when I had a new baby and you were knackered and you got no sleep, to think about how much money am I putting into my pension pot. But actually, I should have done that on return to work, where actually my partner might have been able to top up for me, if not all, then some of it. But I was lucky, my employer still paid in, but not everyone does. So please find out if you're going off on maternity leave. And the other big thing I would tell my future self is, when I went part-time, I felt really fortunate to go part-time. It let me focus in on my children. It let me focus in on their therapies that they needed with the situation that they have, with the disabilities that they have. And all of that felt like a really great balance. But did I think about what that impact that would have when I hit 55, when I hit 65? I didn't. And I think now I would go back. I'm not sure I would make a different choice, but I would be making it with my eyes wide open in terms of what it means for me personally. To wrap up, Anna and I have told you what we would do differently. Some tough times out there, you know, we do recognise that finances are hard for people just now, and that you'll be making choices based on how you are just now. The government, including pensions and furlough, just tells you how important you saving for the future is to the government, that they have stepped in and made sure that your pension contributions, if you have been furloughed, continue to be made as part of that scheme. But thank you. Ask any questions that you want. We've really enjoyed sharing our journey and some of the reasons that we are passionate about making a difference for women and their future retirement. Thank you.
Thank you.